Well, look, let me kick it off for anyone who's listening. Today's guest is Helen Hadfield, owner, MD and EP over at Snapper Films. I was having a read of your bio, and one of the things that struck me is that you're an extremely, or what seems to come across as you're an extremely passionate person, and that you may have started Snapper Films for no other reason apart from to make good work with good people.
I'm a massive believer in being driven by your passions, not by and what you love, not by being driven by your wallet. There was an amazing remark that a writer I really like, he wrote Slumdog Millionaire, and I think I said it to you, Fionn. He said that when he was asked why he wrote Trust, he said, "Well, I was very interested." He said, "Everyone sits somewhere on the axis between love and money, and obviously Getty sat right up the other end and died, the sort of loneliest, most miserable man in the whole world with an awful lot of cash." And it's interesting that the legacy of the Getty generation is still going on, and the legacy of all that money is still going on. But nobody could possibly say that he was happy. That's the saddest thing. And it's a very interesting thing, is that where, I guess in the end, it's all about balance. But I think that's the thing that we have to get right in commercials. There's an awful lot that we do, which is about love of what we do, and that produces extraordinary results. And obviously, we need to be paid for what we do because we're putting an awful lot of energy. But I've never known anyone work on anything that's not really good without delivering way over and above what they're actually being remunerated for, if you see what I mean. And I would say that was true in all walks of life. I mean, it's true in medicine. It's. I hope it's true in law. I sometimes slightly worry about that. And the places where it's true, which is definitely medicine, and definitely I would say our industry, are the places when you see that that's when the heart kicks in.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. So when did this all start for you? How did this all start for you?
Well, I guess it always started where everything always starts. Is it starts with stories. I think all my life I've loved stories. I love stories. I love people's stories, like you, Fionn. I love reading stories. I love watching stories. I love listening to stories. I think we all do. Actually, I think that's what connects us. And I think the most exciting thing we always do as human beings is properly connect. And I think our industry is fantastic for that. And when we all connect and we all come together, and you can, one of the strengths of it is seeing, and I think it's always struck me, that incredible art of collaboration and connection that comes about when people are telling stories and really want those stories to work and resonate and be exciting. So I kind of didn't go in any kind of direction that I think my parents were really rather hoping I might. And but they knew, instead of reading law at university, I read English, pursuing again my great love of stories, really. And I was at university for quite a long time because I did some postgrad stuff, and so I was a bit late in coming to the party and deciding what I wanted to do. But I did sort of know what I wanted to do, which at the time was I wanted to get into telling real stories, truthful stories, and documentaries. And I was worried about how I might support myself. So I'd done a year qualifying to teach in a comprehensive. So I'd done that for a year, which is actually incredibly valuable. And then I came to London with nowhere to live, apart from the fact my cousin very kindly said she had a room in her flat. So fantastic. And what I really, really needed was a job. And I was determined. I'd written an idea for a documentary that I had, because I think at the heart, the reason why I like stories and I like real stories is because I think that's when you connect the most. And obviously, whether you're making them up or whether you're reading them and they're not true, what we actually relate to is the truth in them. So I'd written an idea that appealed to me, and I'd met a very nice woman at the BBC who was charming, who said, yes, she felt that I could potentially have a job as a researcher, which I was very excited about. Anyway, and I felt that might be a journey towards some kind of respectability, which I think my parents would have been quite relieved about. But actually, while I was sitting in my cousin's flat, literally ringing I spent the whole day with the phone directory in front of me, just ringing, ringing people and asking. And I'd been interviewed by an interesting man at a corporate. I had 3 interviews on the table. I had the one at the BBC, which I thought would be very exciting, and then I had another one at a corporate video company, where the man said, "Well, if you think you can write a piece about me," which I did. I have to be honest, he missed all the irony in it, but he offered me a job, and the man whose job his department he was popping me into was a little cross to find that he'd put some unknown graduate into his department without an interview. But he said I'd have to come back for a second interview, and then my third one was at the moving picture company, and I'd literally rung up and I spoke to a woman. He's still a friend of mine, and actually has a huge career. And I will say she's actually responsible for producing The Crown, which is fairly amazing.
Wow.
Has gone on to do lots of other things. And she was fantastic on the phone. And I said somewhat naively, "Oh, I was just hoping there might be a job as a PA." And she said, "No, I am the PA. And there isn't a job as a PA, but we do have a job going as a receptionist. Would you like to come in for that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd absolutely really like to come in for that." So I went in and I had an interview with the managing director and the head of production, because MPC had a production arm as well. And it was a fantastic interview. And I remember the one with the head of production, and she took one look at my CV, which, especially there, all dressed up in my interview outfit. I only had one interview outfit, which I wore solidly to all the interviews, skirt and a jacket and all the rest of it.
I like it. Yeah, the one white shirt that I would have had as well, as like a young runner.
Yeah, exactly. And since then, by the way, I've hardly ever wear skirts. And one of the things I love about our industry is I can live in my jeans. But anyway, one of the very few occasions that I turned up in the interview outfit, wearing the skirt and the jacket and all the rest of it. And she took one look at my CV and she said, and she looked at the degrees and things, and she said, "Well, none of that's relevant." And it was kind of refreshing, really, because what I realised, which really excited me, was that no one was interested in what you'd done. People were all where you come from. What united everybody was they had a common interest, an interest in film and making films, and that to me was incredibly exciting. And so she interviewed me, and then I was interviewed by the managing director, and they had 7 runners at I think at one time at MPC. When you were on reception, you were in charge of the runners. And so he asked me, he said, "Well, do you think you'd be able to manage 7 runners while you're sitting on reception?" And I said, "Well, I'll have a good go at it. I've had 40 in a classroom. I'll have a go. And I think it'll be all right." And so I went home to my cousin and I said, "I'm just going to take whichever job they offer me first, because I've just got to get started." And they rang that evening and said, "We'd like to give you the job as the receptionist at MPC," which was absolutely fantastic. So I went into MPC, absolutely thrilled to bits, sat on reception, and I can't even begin to tell you how busy it was. And I was trained by a very remarkable woman. And I think that's probably one of the most exciting things I find about our industry, is how much you learn. I'm still on a massive learning curve. I never stop learning. It was incredibly busy. The phone, to give you an idea, that the phone rang non-stop all the time. And there were 3 of us sitting on a desk, and we didn't even have time to run to the loo. So, and you were arranging the flowers as well at the same time for the offices that were around the rest of the building, and organising the 7 runners and taking the calls. And Sharon had several rules. When you took a call from someone the second time, you had to recognise their voice, know who they were, and what they might possibly be ringing about, which is a lot to take in. So the second time they ring, you say, "Oh, hello, so-and-so, I'd really, can I put you through wherever?" Which is quite a bit of mental acrobats when they're going all the time. And so you got a very clear idea of what jobs were going on in the building, who was working with who, and why people were coming in. She also had an absolute rule that if anyone came into that building and you were on reception, that you made eye contact, you spoke to them, and you directed them to the absolute best place. It was a really great induction. The only thing I was really bad at was organising the flowers at the same time.
That's it. It's a special time, isn't it, when you're working on something that you're passionate about. So you're really into it, and then you kind of start meeting other people who feel the same way. So you're all kind of really connected by an energy and a kind of a drive, which is definitely one of the attractions of filming and what we do.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I honestly would say that being on a set is like one of those. It's like the best drug you'll ever take. I mean, not that I'm not that I'm very experienced in that area. I'm really not. But it is the most fantastic experience. I don't think there's anything like it. I mean, I think anyone who spent time on a set being part of that creation feels it. And it doesn't matter what your role is, because every single role is incredibly important. And I remember thinking, obviously, when I started, we all shot on film. We shot on film for ages. And I remember thinking, you look at the loader, and he's got to put his hands in the bag, and he's got to get that film into those magazines, and he's got to make sure that no daylight comes out, and then it's got to be loaded on. And you're doing that job under huge pressure.
Yeah, but do you know what I remember, right? I worked on Sweeney Todd.
Oh, yeah.
For months and months, right? The last thing I did every day, driving out of the studio in an old banger of a car that I had at the time,
Yeah.
which was an absolute crock.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I had the reels of film that we just shot that day, and I was driving them over to Deluxe.
Oh no, it's incredible, isn't it? And you've got that entire film in your car.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had the entire film of that day, that week. It was in my car, and I drop it off at Deluxe. I thought there was definitely a flaw in the system there. Helen, I wanted to ask you, right? I want you to kind of look back at MPC, right? Because you talk about the kind of atmosphere that was there, and the kind of being allowed to fail, and actually, but also being allowed to thrive, and getting promoted, and they're all really positive things, right? In an industry where I suppose it isn't often always the case. What do you attribute that atmosphere to, or whom do you kind of attribute it to now that you look back on it? Because it just feels like such a fantastic place to have been, but I imagine there was somebody who was responsible for that.
Oh, I think it's always the people. I think it's always the people. I think it's always the people that you learn from and who teach you, and they are absolutely responsible for that. And I was just incredibly lucky, I think. I mean, Mark Benson, who runs MPC now, and is extraordinary. He was there at the time when I was there. He was running bookings, and that he had incredible capacity to stay amazingly calm under massive pressure. That's the other thing you notice. And also, they never said no. And there was another brilliant man called Matthew Holborn, and he actually started Double Negative ages afterwards, which was an extraordinary company. But I remember watching Matthew in action, and he was always keen on learning, and he never said no. He never said no, and they always managed to. That was the other really exciting thing about watching it. They managed to make everything work. They managed to get it all in, and that is a really good lesson to actually watch. And I had a brilliant boss. I mean, she was tough. She was tough, but she was very fair, and I learned a lot from her. She was very generous to me. I remember when I first started producing, I always wanted to do my own budgets. So when I started, I was doing everything. I think I virtually PA'd and produced my own jobs. To some extent. Excited when I actually got a PA, but I loved the working out of the budget. So I remember early on, and she used to do the budgets, but so I then want to do the budgets and then get her to check them afterwards to see whether I was on the same lines, and learning that and realizing how the budget is a distillation really of the vision of the film, and working with that. And I also, when I was a PA, I worked to two fantastic men. I mean, this is where I was so lucky. So Jeremy was amazing, and he was incredibly calm under pressure, but also I used to think he liked things to go wrong. because he found it exciting.
It's interesting though, because I agree. Like I love the buzz of pressure. You know, like the amount of times when someone goes like, "We need to get this done in the time. Can we do it?" And internally you're thinking, "No fucking way." But then externally you have to smile and go, "Do you know what? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can do it." And you're thinking of solutions, and the way my brain works, it's like 50 solutions kind of come together, and you're thinking, all right, we'll focus on this, not that, and you're kind of like producing it in your own head. A question I have though is like, was there ever a time back then, Helen, when you were like, do you know what? I don't like this job. I don't know I don't like where I am with, say, this person I'm working with, be it a director or a client, and how do you, as a producer, deal with that situation? Like, how do you what's your mindset in that scenario?
I genuinely think there are people I've enjoyed working with more than others, but on the whole, it's a very interesting thing. I have a lovely producer who works with me at Snapper, who actually was working in a film company when I met her, and I noticed she sat in the meetings that we were having, and she'd held down a full-time job, very demanding full-time job, and at the same time produced 5 short films. And ages after, she said, I'd like to come and work in advertising with you. And I thought, well, that's somebody I'd really like to work alongside. I mean, that is fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And what I suppose, she gave me a book, which is a great book, which I recommend to anyone for my birthday one year. I do love a book. And it's called If I Could Tell You One Thing. And this journalist went round interviewing all sorts of really famous people and lots of different people, and asked them for one piece of advice, what their advice would be. And it was very interesting reading them. And funnily enough, Joanna Lumley had her piece of advice, I think it was something along the lines of love everyone, darling, or something. It wasn't quite as abbreviated as that, but it was along those lines. And I think there's something very much to be said, which is you can't always change a situation, but you can change your attitude towards it. And certainly if you're always turning it towards the positive about what you like about someone as opposed to what you don't like about them, because we're all flawed human beings. There are going to be some times that you get irritated and some things that rub you up the wrong way. But if you focus more on what works and less on what doesn't work, you tend to get a better result. And you also tend to find that people react more positively. I think the other thing that really helps is a massive degree of honesty, and not working in an atmosphere of fear, as you say. So if you're in a situation where it's okay to own up what you think, to own up to what you feel and what you think, because there will be times inevitably when you feel overwhelmed, worried, anxious, cross, all of those emotions. I mean, I think that's one of the exciting things in the film industry. I think you can run through the whole gamut of emotions in your job in a very short space of time. And so I think because you're going to run through all of those at times in your life, actually, the honesty of the communication is the most critical thing, and that's what makes really good collaboration. So owning things up. And I think for me, when I produced this short film, which we'd moved heaven and earth to make happen, and I really had moved heaven and earth to make it happen, as I'm sure you know, when you're doing short films, you always do. It's my first short film, and so the director asked me if I would sell the short film, and I said no, I didn't think I could do that. And he said, I don't think you can produce for me anymore. And I said, no, I think you're right. I don't think I can. And I think because it's a really, one of the most exciting and rewarding things is working with people. But I couldn't take his career to another stage. Do you see what I mean? Because I wouldn't have been the right person to do it. I think we're all at our best when we're okay with our vulnerability, but that's a very tough place to be, because we inevitably want to protect yourself a bit.
It's tough to own up to, and sort of
and I think as a director, owning that as an ambition. Secondly, you are right out there. You are up in front. You are right up against it. And so, of course, I think, there will be times when when it's difficult and when it's frightening and when it's worrying. And actually, I think some of your role as a producer is to absorb that and to help with that and to actually nurture the director so that at least they're in a space where it's okay to be uncomfortable, if that makes sense. We actually really enjoyed our collaborations, and then we went to a company together, because literally I was literally exhausting. I was running around London desperately trying to get scripts for us to work. I think my bank manager at the time was utterly terrified. I mean, he really was. It was a state of sort of, nerve-wracking thing. You're thinking, well, would I actually be able to earn my living at all? And I think it was highly questionable at the time. Me and that director went into another bigger company together. And that was an absolute joy, because then I got to work with a man who's very sadly dead. But he was a legend in the industry and one of the most generous, creative, compassionate, brilliant human beings, really. He was called Vernon Howe, and he and his partner, who's just died actually, Vernon died some years ago, but Terry Love, they invented the line Heineken, the Heineken line, refreshes the parts other beers can't reach. And he was just and I was so excited. And so then I got to sell, because in those days you didn't have reps. So, as a producer, and it's something I'd learned at MPC, as a producer, you wanted to work, you went out and you got the work. You went out and you met people, actually, it's still, to be really honest, as Fionn knows, it's something I still love doing now.
Which is such a big part, I suppose, of your job as like an MD and an owner of say, your own film company. So just walk me through, how did you get to this point now from where you were then?
Again, I was very fortunate. A director from another company, big director, came in and he said to me, I'd like you to produce for me, but I want to do it somewhere else. So I left to work with him, and that was fantastic. That was, again, another really amazing experience. He was a joy, really great to work with. And then by accident, it was really by accident, we were working at a big company, and that company decided to close. I think not for any, probably I think because it just wasn't making the margins that they thought it should be making. And so we found ourselves on our own, and we founded our first film company, my first film company, and I literally just got married, and I was living in my husband's flat, which is fine, and we started our first film company, and we landed our first job within 2 weeks. No time to find an office. I put 6 phone lines into my husband's flat at the time, the fax machine, and I moved my PA into the back bedroom, and we did our first job. I never forget, it was for Deutsche Bank, and it was called We Work Hard. And I remember thinking, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And we were, and it was absolutely brilliant. And the amazing thing was, I remember it was terribly scary, because I remember saying to my husband, I'd used some, put my own money. I had this very small, it felt very big at the time, but I had a small amount of money that was left to me by an aunt, my brilliant aunt, who'd been a surgeon at the same time as my father, but was 10 years older than him, and she left everything to her nieces and nephews, which was amazing. So I used that sum of money to start the production company with David, and it was terrifying. I remember saying to my husband, "Oh my God, I could lose the only thing in my life I've been given this gift. I could lose the whole lot." He said, "No, it's going to be fine. Hell, this is what you really want to do." I was absolutely petrifying. And when the fax used to go, we used to have a fax machine in those days. It's sort of whatever time it was, whether it was midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I leapt out of bed. I must read this right now. I must look at this right now. And we had the most, and then I was thrilled when we found an office. And then actually, we had a third partner who came into the company, who David knew, it was John Ilsley, who was part of Dire Straits, which is fairly amazing. And so I got my money back, and which we used to help move from the flat to a little house, actually, which is very exciting. And we worked our socks off. And I remember we had our first office, and that was absolutely brilliant. That was my first company, and I was incredibly lucky. I worked with, very sadly, another man, he's now dead, but one of the most inspiring directors I probably ever worked with was a man called John Howard Davis, who had been head of comedy at the BBC, and he'd done everything from Fawlty Towers to Monty Python to The Good Life to Mr. Bean, to Reggie Perrin, and he'd been a child star, so he'd been Oliver in David Lean's Oliver. Yeah, in David Lean's Oliver, though. That was the amazing thing. So the black and white one. He was the little he's the little bomb. And so he'd been an actor, and then he'd become a director, and he taught me so much. I can't even begin to tell you. And he was so generous. And I absolutely loved working with him. And it was a revelation to me, because when we did casting sessions, he expected the actors we had to send them character breakdowns before they came in. And they came in, and I was watching this script come to life in a way I'd never seen that before. I watched these actors come in and really work. And when they left the casting audition, they thanked him very much for coming in, because they'd really excelled. It was incredibly exciting to work with him. And I remember one of our early commercials, which was low budget. It was tiny, and it had sort of somewhat sneaked under the radar. And we were on the set, and it was very, very funny. And everyone was a bit worried about that it might be crossing a boundary. It might be just too funny or bit sort of risky, and it wouldn't get through what was then the BACC. So the agency producer said to me, I'm very worried. I don't think we're going to have to get him to do it a different way, because it's not going to get through the BACC, and that's really worrying. And so I walked over to him and said, John, everyone's a bit worried. And he looked at me and went, yeah, I can see that, Hel. Well, I said, well, do you think you could do it? He said, what do you think we should do about it? He said, would you like me to do it differently, or do you want me to? No, what he said was, do you want me to compromise now or later? So, which I thought was a very interesting question. So I said, well, okay, let's not compromise now. Let's do it the way you want to do it, and then we'll manage the overtime. I'll pay for the overtime, and we'll do it the way we'll do it. We'll do a safe version. But of course, it was the one that he did that got that into D&AD.
What I'm sort of hearing there, Helen, is between the lines. It's essentially like your imagination does so much for you, and maybe part of what is exciting for your job, and again, I'm probably putting words in your mouth here, is the idea that you can bring that to life in some form. You can kind of take an idea and then make it like a reality.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly exciting. But I think anything, when you watch, I always think when you read a script or a book or anything really, and then in your mind, when you read the book, you're bringing the book to life, aren't you? You're bringing that story to life. You bring those people to life. They become very real to you, those characters. And in a film, you've got a whole other dimension, because you add sound. And that sound and vision, it seems incredible. And that's so rich, isn't it? So it doesn't really get that much more exciting about it. And also they're distillations of life, which I always think is so interesting. It's like little distillations of life. That's amazing, isn't it?
Helen, it was a pleasure, and I will talk to you very soon. But thank you so much.
Thank you, and
I
just hope it wasn't all too much. That's the problem. You have to do a lot of editing, Adam.
Luckily,
very,
it's one of the
good.
things I love doing. No, I can't wait to re-listen. And thank you, Helen. Really nice, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon. So thanks again for joining Fionn and I with our guest this week, Helen Hadfield, MD and owner of Snapper Films. Tune in again to listen to future guests, and please hit us up on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. Till then, speak soon.